one of the things that I know that a lot of people have questions about is how the Sheriff's Department deals with people who have mental health issues, and that the jail system has become a mental health hospital, an institution. And I think this is a really tricky issue, and let's see how he dances around it. Mr. Lou Vince, what's going on?
No music?
Yeah, bounce.
Well, as you know, the mental illness is a huge problem in the community as a whole, but specifically the Sheriff's Department, because there's criminality as a result of their mental illness, and they wind up in the criminal justice system. There's been an adversarial position between the Sheriff and the Board of Supervisors, and therefore no relationship with the Department of Mental Health. As the Sheriff, I'd lobby the Board of Supervisors to have the Department of Mental Health exercise their political clout to set up treatment, to set up mental health courts, so that these folks can be diverted, right on intake, on arrest. There's mental health professionals there to evaluate them and go, okay, well, this guy, he's got a history, he meets all the criteria, and move him out of that system. Because what happens is you put him in the jail with a high school educated deputy with no training whatsoever, and it winds up being, an escalation of violence, and they can't deal with each other. The second component to that, and the mental illness.
Why are you looking at me? Why would you mention mental health till you look at me?
It's the time. The second component to that is professionalizing the jail staff. They have no training. Their goal, when you get in jail as a deputy, you're counting days just like the inmates to when you can get out. That's got to stop. We need to professionalize the jail staff. We don't need full-fledged deputies in there. We need people that want to be there, sociologists, psychologists, etc., that want to work with people and help them transition out. So that's two of the ways that I would do that, Mark.
Is this the end? Is that the end of your answer?
Yes.
I like it.
Okay.
Did you talk about the 72 hours that they don't get their medicine?
I did not. My people's eyes were starting to glaze.
No, but I think that's really important. Explain this, because I think it's really tragic what happens.
Well, when they go into custody, they don't get seen. There's not enough psychiatrists, not enough psychologists, and they don't get any of their medicine. So if they have any onset or exacerbation of their mental illness because they're not on their meds, well, are we on video?
Yeah.
Okay, let me think here.
Do you want me to stop it?
You don't own the Clippers, do you?
Let's just say that there's a conflict that arises because they're acting in an inappropriate manner for the jail setting, and whether they're redirected by the deputies or by other inmates, it's not good for anybody. So that needs to stop too.
All right, awesome. Diane, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, talking about the mental illness component makes me think about how do you train the deputies to be able to understand when there are children who have special needs who may act inappropriately, and that might cause the deputies to react poorly to their situation. There are kids who have mental illnesses or other disabilities that may act out, and it may be misinterpreted by the deputies as aggression or something like that.
Well, there's got to be a training. I mean, one of the things I want to do, and this is just one component of it, is reboot the entire training curriculum. There's got to be an ethical leadership course where they learn that they can do the right thing even when nobody's watching. That it's okay to go against your peers as long as you're respectful and tell the bosses and what have you. As far as that, there's got to be subject matter experts that come to the academy, introduce them to. I'm just gonna guess that maybe you're talking about someone with autism or something like that. That they need to meet these people, so they may not have had that experience. Right. Part of the problem is that you got a 19-year-old high school graduate that's never been exposed to that before, and they don't know what to make of it. They've just come out of the high school. So one of the things I want to see is to have the hiring standards tightened up greatly. One of the first things I want to see is education. I know that education is important and a must because for no other reason than you get exposed to a broad range of things that you weren't exposed to when you're growing up. So I want to see the deputies have at least an associate's degree, probably a 4-year degree to promote. That's going to take a little while and a little fighting with the unions, but you can't be afraid to do it.
Okay. And just along those lines quickly, how do you weed out people who are drawn to this type of service who have maybe more violent tendencies?
Well, part of it is the cultural shift where you're not going into the jail, where you're dealing with people that are violent. the senior deputies there, while there's some that are, there because of the hours, what have you, that like the job, a lot of them are there, they're in the penalty box. And the younger deputies get indoctrinated by those senior deputies. And we need to stop that vicious circle. So that they just come out and you go to patrol, and if you can't make it dealing with people like Ed and Judy or even Dave,
Thank you.
right? If you can't make it dealing with people like that on patrol, then you don't belong at all. So that's how we're going to weed that out.
Very good, thank you.
David, question?
I have found that more and more police officers are pulling their weapons and shooting people, especially a lot of innocent people who shouldn't be shot, rather than retreating and reassessing and then trying to take care of the scenario with more thought. Have you ever given that any thought? Because that's truly one of my big concerns with the police departments all around the country is when police, more and more, when police are confronted with a situation that's very dangerous and people's safety are at issue, instead of taking a few steps back, reassessing, maybe waiting for backup, they attack and they start shooting. What do you think of that?
I think you have a valid concern. One of the things I want to see is frontline supervisors, sergeants, lieutenants, the supervisors that are out there in the field. They should not be, senior cops. They are supervisors. So they need to have more of a role and have more of an understanding that their job is to grab that deputy or that police officer by the shirt collar and pull them back and go, let's reassess here, not get involved in the situation themselves. It's hard to make that transition from officer or deputy to management, but we need to focus on that so that they're able to make that call. The second thing is training. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something, and that's part of the culture of the cliques and the getting the smoke on your gun, on your tattoo. We need to weed that out entirely so that that's not the be all end all that makes you the cop, the macho deputy. We need to understand that the people that are doing the good work are the ones that are not getting involved in that. Sure, police work can be ugly, and there's going to be times when that has to be done, but that should be the last resort any time force is used.
Nanette? Right here on your left.
Here?
Nanette?
Okay, back to the mental health evaluations and things. Has there ever been, LA County is gigantic, and the sheriff department is huge and bigger than personnel than so many cities. Has there been an example of another city successfully doing an evaluation on mental health and weeding out the problems in the jail? Or would this be like the first city to try to tackle this issue?
There's I'm glad I was reading today. There's actually a county in Northern California that just did it, and I was just reading about it. I think it's Laura's Law, where they're mandated to put them into mental health treatment, and it's not a violation, because now if you keep someone that's mentally ill and there's no crime, or even though they're going to go right out in the street and commit another crime because they have mental illness, it's a violation of their constitutional rights. The county up there has implemented a process where they divert them into treatment, and because everybody's on board, their board of supervisors, the sheriff's department, there's no constitutional violation. So I'd want to mirror that program. I don't have all the details with me, actually. But it's not, the thing about the sheriff's department, and I've said it before, you ask anybody, oh, that's the way we've always done it, or we've never done it that way. There's sheriff's departments all over the United States where these problems don't happen. And I would go nationwide to find best practices. And, I met the current custody chief of, assistant sheriff of custody, Terry McDonald. She's a great lady, but she came from CDCR, California Department of Corrections. I mean, I don't know if that's the best place to go looking for best practices for the sheriff's department. So I'd want to have a nationwide search.
Okay, thank you.
Ethan, do you have a question?
Kind of pretty well covered it, but I guess I could touch on drug war.
Yeah,
Recreational
drugs.
marijuana use. We're paying something like $80,000 a year to imprison non-violent offenders. It's costing the state a lot of money. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a big supporter of the drug war. I've seen it in action for the last 20 years, and people that have some reason to be using drugs, there's usually some underlying issue, and the fact that now they're in jail makes that issue worse. So I don't want to see people that merely suffer from addiction in the LA County jail system. So I'd lobby for more drug courts, more diversion. We have it now, but it doesn't work. Prop 36 and diversion. It's just ultimately they wind up in jail. I don't want to see people that just suffer from an addiction. And a lot of times, going back to the mental illness issue, it's people medicating their untreated mental illness with illegal drugs. Now, as far as the marijuana, I don't support. I'd institute a policy of pretty much no enforcement on simple possession of marijuana. That's a waste of time and resources, and it also impacts certain communities differently.
Anybody else have a question? Yeah, Minerva?
What is your position on the Second Amendment?
Why you ask the tough question, Minerva? No.
Because Raymond
That's why she's hosting.
Raymond sent me an email a couple days ago and wanted to know what was your position on that, and I told him I'd make sure to ask you.
Okay, my position is that you got your finger over the lens, Todd.
He's protecting you.
That is a perfect position. Leave it there.
He doesn't edit well.
Okay, do you want me to stop it? I'll stop it.
I'm just kidding. No. It's an ethical dilemma for me. The last thing I want to see is more guns on the street, because I've seen what gun violence can do. But on the other hand, it's the law. It's the Second Amendment, part of the Constitution. It's the Ninth Circuit Court has just upheld it. The Supreme Court has upheld it. So I would issue CCWs. The current policy is no processing them, no processing the applications. But I would process them if you don't suffer from mental illness, you have no serious criminal background, no recent criminal background, and you met the training requirements, you'd be able to get a CCW. The Orange County Sheriff's Department just instituted that same requirement, if you will, same subset of requirements, and they got. I asked this question. I asked the Democratic groups, and they're like, 200,000, 300,000 applications. They got 500. Okay, so it's not the big, hammer waiting to fall. Bad choice of words, but that everybody thinks it is. And right now, most of the people that want to get CCWs, they wind up becoming reserve sheriff's deputies. I was a reserve sheriff's deputy for 4 years, and I know that while there's a great Sorry, there's a moth.
Trying to help you out. CCWs are concealed carry
Weapon permit.
Okay.
A lot of those folks become reserve sheriff's deputy just so they can get the CCW. So I foresee the requirements to be the same, except you don't have to be a reserve sheriff's deputy to do it. And it's going to be monitored, and we're going to revisit.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just.
Can you talk about in Michelle Alexander's book? I've asked you this question before. In Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, she talks about the mass incarceration of African Americans. Can you talk about your position, or how you, as the sheriff, is going to decrease the percentage of African Americans who are incarcerated? How can you?
Give us a free pass.
Of course. Thank you for the question, Kristen. Well, that touches on this gentleman's question here too. A lot of times with the marijuana that is criminalized, a lot of times the higher crime areas are populated by minorities sometimes, and then that gets an inordinate amount of police resources to combat that crime, but it winds up causing a disparate impact with that community. For instance, the African American community, and it's the mass incarceration of our youth is really what we're talking about, is where something in, say, Santa Clarita wouldn't necessarily even be contacted or stopped or what have you. In the higher crime areas, they're being contacted and stopped because the mission is to go there and fight crime.
Right.
And as a consequence, they're getting put into the criminal justice system. As sheriff, I want to see us spend more time, money, resources, and effort keeping people out of jail, not finding new and better ways to keep them in or give them tickets or build things up. Is he getting bored? That's how I know it's time to go. So I would focus on that and have the mindset of the department to be mentoring, diversion. Just because you can give someone a ticket for eating a bagel on a bus bench doesn't mean you should be giving them the ticket.
Right. Exactly.
Right. There's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. So we need to break that cycle because it just continues. Now, they may have a child and now they're in jail for something silly like not paying a fare evasion ticket, and now the child and the mother have to fend for themselves with making ends meet. So we're feeding our own problem by not acknowledging it and trying to do something about it.
Thank you.
Good answer.
Lou, what's your opinion about people having the right to defend their homes? There's been a couple cases recently where people have been in their homes and they've been broken into a few times, and out of frustration they've actually, there was a case where couple cases where people have lied in wait with weapons ready, drawn, and just waiting for someone to break in, and then when they did, they shot them and killed them. Do you have any opinion on where the law should be drawn, or where
As
someone?
the judge of the Superior Court. No,
Well, I'm just, maybe you're not the right person to.
no, I appreciate
Ask,
that question.
but
It's an
just
important question.
yeah.
It's really about a reasonableness standard.
Yeah.
And I like to answer a lot of questions about being reasonable. Is it reasonable that you're home and all of a sudden someone breaks through your door and you're in fear and you take action? I think that's reasonable. But if you know it's happening, I think the reasonable course of action is to certainly protect yourself. Maybe leave the situation or call 911. There's going to come a time where you can't, but I don't think you can set up a hasty ambush like you're in the military, waiting for someone to break in your house. That seems unreasonable
Yeah.
to me, although every situation is different.